for you today. So for today's exploration, we have three speakers, and they're going to talk to you about how they got into science and kind of what they do now. And so to start, we'll hear from Stephanie Woodman, who's a graduate student in engineering, and then Benjamin Chan, who's a research scientist in ecology and evolutionary biology, and Emily Sinisalco, who is a graduate student in immunobiology. So with that, I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Hi there, everyone. Let me share my screen. So assuming everybody can see this, but I'm Stephanie. I'm a first-year PhD student here at Yale studying mechanical engineering, just like I did in undergraduate. I grew up just like 50 minutes away in Stamford, Connecticut, and went to Boston University for undergrad, so a little bit north. And now I just wanted to tell you I love reading and hiking and going to the beach outside of all the time we spend in lab. And I'm really excited to share with you how I got a little bit into science. So in high school, and definitely throughout all of high school, I absolutely loved biology. I didn't study a ton of it in middle school because I liked writing poetry and other things. And then my middle school was definitely more directed towards the creative arts. But when I got to high school, I just loved learning about how cells worked and how plants grew and everything like that. And so I was really, really into it all through high school. And then once I got to college, I planned on studying pre-med and bio. And then at some point, I just discovered maybe I was too squeamish. I didn't want to be a doctor. And so I was kind of exploring other options. And a couple of my friends, luckily, were into engineering. They lived with me in college and they loved it. And they were like, oh, we have a rocket team here. And I was like, well, that's something that I've never done before, ever, and sounds very interesting. And I love learning new things. So I really wanted to be a part of that. So I just decided to, on my own, show up and join the team. And they were really friendly and I was still studying biology then. So they were very accepting of what I knew and what I didn't know. And I had to learn a lot of new things, including how to design these pneumatics boards and design this rocket nozzle, which we had machined. So that was very exciting. And also on that rocket team, before I even switched into engineering, I learned about computer-aided design, CAD. We were able to design these rocket components on a computer and make sure all the measurements were correct. And we were actually able to go out and machine these things in our in-home machine shop, most of them, and put this together. You can see our rocket nozzle here and our test stand over here. So we make the rocket engine and we put it on a test stand. And then in the picture on the left, we actually went out into the middle of nowhere and tested our rockets, which was a really neat experience that we got to do almost every weekend. And so then, of course, I just had this huge realization. I loved learning about how things worked, and I loved solving problems. And engineering was really fun and creative in a way that I hadn't realized that it was before. So I really hadn't considered engineering as an option for me because math wasn't, my favorite subject. And of course, I love it now, and I've learned to gain confidence in it. But still, it had never been an option for me. But then I was like, wow, I can really do this, and I love it. And I got into exploring things like here, the picture on the left is called ion propulsion. So these ions are basically shot out of a little propeller, and that's just another way of generating force in one direction, like a rocket engine. And then I got into planes and things when I interned for GE Aviation later on, and I just realized that it was really fun. And so I decided to switch into engineering, and this is pretty much what my book bag looked like. Packing up for that would be my sophomore year, my second year of college. So I just had all these new textbooks. I didn't end up taking my CAT, though I wish I could have. But I just had so much to learn because I'd never taken an engineering course, and I'd never participated in tinkering. I'd never coded before, and all of these things. I was so overwhelmed. And so during this transition, I had so much to catch up on. I really felt like I wasn't enough. Like I'd never taken these really advanced math courses. And I realized that if I just, made friends is really important, having that support system behind you. But working really hard, just doing it because you love it, and you pick it up as you go along. Here, this on the picture on the left is our final junior year project. which was a little machine that could carve pottery in an automated way. So no humans were involved of the making of these little kettles that we decided to make for the end of the year demonstration. And it was also fun helping other people. This is in the same class at a different time, but we were learning how to program a 3D printer. So that was very fun. And then in my junior year, I was introduced to engineering research. In my specific topic, I was studying what are called magnetorheological fluids, MR fluids, and it's basically just magnetic particles in a water. And when you apply a magnetic field, it becomes a solid. And it can do crazy things like eat this magnet and even help suspension in cars. And a lot of research is being done around this. And I just thought it was really interesting. And so then I started research in my junior year. I studied MR fluids in soft robots. So the work here on the lower right, that's a robot that I made using MR fluids as the actuator of the robot. So MR fluid makes its way through this robot, and then we stop the flow. And because the pressure builds up in one of these legs, it bends down and is able to move the robot. And these are just other examples of soft robots. This little guy is just magnets in a rubber, and it's able to work. And then other soft robots, they can wrap a robotic skin around this horse, and it's able to walk. And then they made a robotic fish, which was really cool. And so now, after all of that, I realized that I loved research and engineering, and I wanted to get my PhD in soft robotics. And so I'm here at Yale. And hopefully, through my time, I'm able to develop something remotely close to this. But the idea is that this ball of clay can morph into an inchworm and crawl over the mountains, and then maybe even grow legs and be able to walk. And so in my research this semester, I've been making soft components that can stretch. So this is a stretchy Arduino. You can program it, and you can pull it and put it on top of a robot and move it however you want. So this is that's how I got from point A to point B in my engineering journey. And it's been really fun along the way. So I'm really happy I get to share it with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That's some really cool work. The last one kind of reminds me of like Pokemon. You just roll out a ball and suddenly you have a lizard.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you have, yeah, so if you have questions for Stephanie, put them in the chat and we can ask, we'll have some time to ask her at the end as well. But next we have Benjamin. So Benjamin, you can share your screen now.
Okay, cool. Should we go? All right. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm totally excited to be here. And yeah, that was so awesome. Stephanie's stuff looks so cool. Anyway, without getting too distracted, how cool it was. So this is, I thought I'd share my path with how I got to where I am, from this kid on the left to this much older kid on the right. But in both cases, sort of obsessed with reptiles and amphibians in the outdoors. This is my contact info if you guys want to email me. But I've always been sort of into playing outside, always. And that's just like been my thing. It could be because I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Seattle, Washington. So from out west, where like the outdoors are amazing. Highly recommend visiting if you haven't been. It's a picture of my dad and my sister in the lower right, and the two cities here. So yeah, I guess I was an early fan of Marvel back in Utah, and poor wardrobe choices in Washington. But after high school, which I was in high school in Utah, I went to college and grad school in Utah, believe it or not. And ever since first grade, I've been obsessed with the outdoors. And then in first grade, we one of the parents brought in a microscope, and I was like, that's for me. Like science is just like the best. And so I spent all this time in grad school outside studying poison dart frogs here in the lower left corner, a pic I stole from National Geographic on the web. And then after grad school, I had this like weird change. It's a whole other story. But then I like all of a sudden found myself being a microbiologist, which is what I do now. And now I study these guys here in the little alien looking thing, which is a virus of bacteria. It's called a bacteriophage, and I study those. And I spend a lot of time in lab, but I always wanted to do, growing up, wanted to be a doctor, right? Or a scientist. And it was a struggle ending up deciding I wanted to be a scientist. But that trade-off has always been there for me. And it still is. And people are asking me all the time, do you want to study, in the lab, or do you want to study in a hospital, right? So yes is the answer. And I want to do both. And what that's called is translational science, where you take stuff from the lab or the environment, you study it in the lab, and then you try to translate it into a hospital, and help try and develop, maybe antibiotics or something, for example. So that's what I do. So I take these viruses that kill bacteria, and I try to use them to treat, antibiotic resistant infections. And so here's like a bunch of like sort of cases in which we've done that. And I think if you Google some of these, you can maybe find some YouTube videos on what we do. And I love it. It's kind of the best job ever. Okay, so then, obviously the lab stuff. So I still get to spend time outside collecting water where I pull these viruses. And then we do a lot of work in the lab. And this is me and Professor Turner here on the right. And he was a speaker in this very program last November. So you should find his talk, because I'm sure it's awesome, because he's kind of the best. Anyway, so do lab work. This is the microbiology work we do. And then, on the side, in all my free time, I'm still outside. I really love pursuing other hobbies, which is, trying to make some documentaries. And so, in doing my field work, sometimes I get to interact with some amazing people. And so I've been working on some documentaries too. They're not out yet, but this is just some sneak peek. So what's next, right? I don't know. I still feel kind of not an adult, although biologically I very much am. And the answer, I have no idea. What do I want to do when I grow up? Probably this, whatever is exciting. And this is kind of the most rewarding, best job that I could imagine. So probably this, but I don't know. Maybe it'll change. I'll let you know. And that's that.
Thanks so much, Ben. That's really cool. Translational work is awesome because you often, or I think these students have heard a lot about research, but you work on bringing it to the clinic and actually helping people, which is really awesome. And that's the ultimate goal for all our work. So finally, we have Emily. So if you want to share your screen.
All right, can we see that? Hold on, my video first. Okay. So, hi, as they said, I'm Emily. I'm a second year grad student in immunology, which is the study of the immune system at Yale. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got from this adorable little vegetable to a similarly dressed adult vegetable standing in front of the building that my department is housed in at Yale. So now I'm a PhD student. First, a little bit about where I came from. This is my family. We like recreating photographs. So this is us at two different Christmases, probably about 10 years apart. There are my parents, my grandparents, and then I'm the oldest of four siblings. So I have three younger siblings. And we're from central New Jersey. So we live about where this flower is right here. And because I'm from New Jersey, I talk really, really fast. So if you can't hear anything, definitely ask me questions and I'm happy to repeat things later in the breakout rooms. I really got into science first when I was a kid because I went on vacation to Florida and I saw the orca show at SeaWorld. And even though I have different opinions about SeaWorld now, I just thought that orcas were the coolest creatures ever. And they were just so fabulous that I wanted to know everything I possibly could about them. And so I got really, really interested in marine science. And I was probably in about third grade at the time. So when I was around 9 or 10, that was when I decided I wanted to be a marine scientist when I grew up. And so to pursue that, I went to a marine science camp that my parents found that was on the New Jersey shore. So there are different locations for this particular camp, but I went to one right here in Beach Haven on Long Beach Island, which is this barrier island off the coast of New Jersey. And I started going there as a freshman in high school. And then eventually when I was too old for the camp, I started working there. And so the purpose of the camp is to teach, kids about the, native marine wildlife of the New Jersey shore. So we would catch and release different creatures and teach the kids about mostly crabs. New Jersey has a lot of crabs. So that's why most of the pictures are, there's a blue crab, there's a spider crab, a hermit crab, another blue crab, a horseshoe crab, which is not a crab, but has crab in the name. And here we are crabbing. But basically we got to learn about a lot of local wildlife, local ecosystems, and then just about marine science in general. So I had a really great time doing this. But at the same time, I was also in high school. And so I knew that I wanted to pursue a science career. And so there was this really awesome opportunity in my town called the Academy for Health and Medical Sciences, which the name is a little misleading, but it's basically a magnet high school where you can get dual enrollment credits from the local community college, which is Raritan Valley Community College. And so through that, I actually earned an associate's degree, which is a 2-year college degree when I was in high school. And during high school, I also, learned a lot about different types of biology. So previously I was all like marine science, ride or die. This is what I'm going to do. But then I learned about, cells and mitosis and the different systems of the body and gene expression. So DNA, transcription into mRNA and translation into protein and all the ways that this controls biology in general and all life. Like so many things have to go right for an organism to be properly functioning, for us to be who we are and to be healthy. And it's such a complicated system that I really wanted to know more about it. So because of that, when I went to college, I went to Ithaca College, and that's in like upstate New York by a lovely, lovely lake. I decided to study regular biology, quotes around regular, instead of marine science, because I wanted to really know more about the biology as a whole. And there is where I also started doing research for the first time. So because I got my associates when I was in high school, I only went to college for 2 years. So I had to go right into research and, put the pedal to the metal and do that right away. So I started working in Taewon Lo's lab when I was in my first semester of college, and we work on these cute little worms called C. elegans. And I studied how the C. elegans germline develops. So that means how stem cells, which are like baby undifferentiated cells that haven't grown up yet, become their final form. So in this case, the sperm or the egg of the worm. And I got to do all sorts of cool things here. These are all the plates that I was trying to pick worms onto that day. So it was definitely a lot of work, but very worth it. I also got to present my work at a conference. So this is the poster that I made. And this is me and some of my lab mates in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, which is where I went my senior year of high school to present my work. So that was really cool. During the summer in between my freshman and my last year of college, I guess, I also did a research internship at the Medical College of Wisconsin in this lovely lady's lab. Her name is Dr. Michelle Battle, and she was a fabulous mentor for the summer. So in the Battle Lab, I worked with mice for the first time, and I got to explore different areas of biology. So I looked at, developmental biology, which is how an organism gets from like one cell to a giant multicellular organism with specialized organs and different functions and the ability to think and act and move and stuff like that. And then cell biology as well, and thinking on a bigger scale than just worms. Here's where I also started doing experiments on my own and learning some new techniques. So one example would be I took these really cool pictures of the mouse large intestine while I was working with in Michelle's lab. So this is a healthy mouse colon. So that's the name for the large intestine. So this would be like the middle of the colon, so the inside of the tube, and then this would be the wall. And then I also stained the cells with different markers. So depending on what color it is, I can tell you some genes that cell is expressing. And this is where my love of the intestine began. This is something that will, continue. And while I was in Wisconsin, I also made some awesome science friends and ate a ton of frozen custard, because that is what you do when you're in the Midwest. So when I got back to college, my main question was, do I go to graduate school right away, or do I wait and take some time off in between? I knew my ultimate goal was to do research, so I knew I needed a PhD at some point, but my options were really now or later. And eventually I decided that I'd rather go to graduate school right after my undergraduate degree. For various different reasons. I wanted like a school structured format. I wanted to learn how to think like a scientist from a specific mentor. And most importantly, I felt like it was something I was ready to do. So that, I think, is the really important takeaway. Is you should, as long as you feel ready, it doesn't really matter so much what other people are telling you to do. Obviously their advice usually comes from a good place, but it's eventually up to you to make that decision on your own. And I definitely would not have been able to apply to grad school right out of undergrad, or probably at all, without the help of these wonderful mentors, and my mom, who is pictured here, is an awesome support system as well. This was in Grand Central Station on my way to interview at Yale, actually, so I like that picture. Now at Yale, I work in the Eisenbarth lab. So this is Dr. Stephanie Eisenbarth. She is my mentor. This is the front door of our lab. I work in this bench over here. And my days now consist of taking care of my mouse colony. So this is me in the mouse room. I actually just got back from the mouse room, probably like 20 minutes before this event started, so I'm there a lot. And I do various different experiments looking at how our immune system reacts to the food that we eat. So this is an example of an immune structure that's located in the intestine, and another really cool image that our lab produces. So a really brief overview of my project is our immune system makes antibodies to all different things that we interact with. Like we make antibodies to COVID that help us fight diseases. Allergies are also caused by antibodies. So this blue antibody is called IgE, and that causes allergy. But food can cause IgE, which also causes anaphylaxis, which is why people need EpiPens and have to avoid peanuts sometimes. But there are other antibodies that target food as well, and they don't cause that, horrible reaction. So how do both of those get made is a question that still remains unanswered, and that's what I'm trying to find out. So that's what I'm really excited about, and hopefully I'll be able to do that over the course of my PhD. Where do I want to go next? I'd like to stay in academia, meaning that I want to be a professor someday. I really like teaching and mentoring and just talking science and learning science and asking questions. And I think that academia is a great place to do all those things. I also feel like any place that you're in, you should always be actively trying to make it better than when you found it. So that's what I also want to try to do with the academic community, specifically advocating for people who aren't always welcomed in that space. So that's what I'd like to do in the future. And then I know we're not asking questions now, but I included this slide with my cat. If anyone has any questions, we can put them in the chat and we can answer them later.
Stephanie, we have a question for you. Could you kind of briefly explain some of the advantages versus disadvantages of soft robots compared to the more traditional, like hard robots?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this in our breakout room too, but soft robots are especially useful for working alongside humans. They're soft, they're squishy. So if they hit you, they're going to deform, you're not going to deform. So they're safe for interaction with humans. And in a lot of cases, they're also used in assembly lines. Soft robotic grippers are used to pick up things that are really delicate, like tomatoes, other animals, crabs, shrimp, and things like that. They've been used underwater to capture really delicate sea animals, deep sea animals for research. And also, as I was talking a little bit about just at the end of our talk, if you're like crawling over a really tough rocky surface, if there's a robot that looks like a human, like a biped, the feet and how the robot balances would have to really be controlled very quickly and very well to adapt to unevenness in the surface. But if the soft robot's foot is soft and squishy, it can just deform around the rock and step over it without changing how we control the robot. It can just say, take a step forward, instead of take a step, adjust, don't fall, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's really cool. Thanks, Stephanie. Ben, a question for you. I think you mentioned that you've worked with some different kind of bacteria and viruses. Is there one that you think is the most interesting to study? Do you have like a favorite?
Ooh, making me choose a favorite. That's a tough one. I think there's some really cool bacteriophages that are viruses out there that we study that that have the ability to like reverse antibiotic resistance. I think that's pretty neat and maybe has some potential for use in people. And so we study those quite a bit. And so I guess if I choose, that'd be my favorite.
Cool. Stephanie, we had a question for you. What to you is engineering about? I know it's kind of broad, but.
It is, yeah, broad, but always a good question. To me, engineering is about seeing a problem that's hurting society and being able to solve it. So in mechanical engineering, a nice application that I like to think of, especially in terms of the soft robotics community, is, what if there's someone who's lost functionality in their arm and they can't use their arm? We can design a soft system, like a soft skin, that can wrap around the arm and roboticize it without having to take off the arm or interfere with like what's already there. We can just build off of it and build in that functionality without it being invasive. So I think that's a really, just being able to solve those problems in the engineering context is really powerful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that a lot of us who do science, I think that's a big driver for a lot of us. It's an important motivation to have. Emily, we had a question, another question about the mice, because I think some people are a little, uncomfortable with small rodents. How do you feel about working with mice? Is it a little scary? And could you also speak maybe a little bit to like the value of having mouse models?
Yeah, of course. So I had only worked with worms when I first started working with mice in my summer research lab, and I was terrified of them. I was not feeling the mice that summer, so I tried to do as little with them as possible. I thought it was really cool, like after they had, been euthanized, to like doing dissections and seeing where all the organs were and looking at like the layout of all, like the entire body, because you can learn a lot about anatomy that way. But handling them was not my cup of tea. But then when I started grad school, I came to grips with it. I practiced a lot, and there are people in your lab to like help you and make you get better at it. So that helped me become more confident working with the mice. And I actually spent 3 hours in the mouse room today, so I think I'm pretty comfortable with them now. It's certainly weird because you forget that like not everybody does this all the time, but but it's it's interesting working with live organisms. But there is a lot of value to it. To speak to the second question, as I said in our breakout room, if you just study, like your body is an amazing interconnected system of many moving parts working together. Like you have your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, you have blood and tissues and muscles, and all of these things are coming together to make your entire body work. And if you were to just take one of those systems and study it in isolation, or just one cell from those systems and study that in isolation, you wouldn't get the whole picture. What you saw might not actually be representative of what's happening in your body. So that's why we use live organism systems to try and study these questions, because allergies, for example, are a big reaction that's happening in many different systems. So if we do it in a mouse, we can study things that are happening in the immune system and the digestive system, and like all different types of body tissues that might be interacting with the food, as opposed to just studying one thing. It really helps us broaden our scope and make our research more relevant and more impactful.
Yeah, I also work with mice. So I totally feel that, and also totally needed some time to get used to the mice when I started working with them. I think one last quick question for Ben. Can you tell us what this animal is? Here we had a couple questions about that.
Sure. It is a chameleon in Uganda somewhere. That's about all I know. Although I noticed in the original slide, the AI guess for what it was like man holding a vegetable. It's definitely not a vegetable.
Is that something that you were studying or just an animal that you found?
Just randomly saw it. Yeah, I was
Nice.
collecting water samples and randomly it was there.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, so that is all the time we have for our question and answer. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here today, for sharing your stories with us. I think that everybody learned a lot and really enjoyed those talks.